All right, everybody, welcome. Justice is a Process is here, and we are talking tonight another Tyrone Tucker video here because there's lots to talk about. As everybody should know by now, closing arguments occurred today, and we're going to be talking about an issue that came up in closing arguments. Another issue, we're called an issue, or it's another instance where the state had, among other things, the closing argument of Prosecutor Mansfield is just a minefield of mistruths and untruths and just absolute twisting and turning of facts. It's an example of what happens when a state attorney has nothing and they do what he did, and it's absolutely terrible. But one of the things that you know is particularly terrible is what he did when it came to this issue with this knife that he claims that Tyrone Tucker told Paula that there was Matt Bonnetts blood on a knife. So we're going to go ahead and cue up the videotape here, and we're talk about that here. Give me a moment. All right. So here we go. We've got it queued up. We're gonna take a moment here. And we're going to listen to this part of the closing argument of Prosecutor Mansfield that deals with this, and then we're going to talk about what he says here, and we're going to talk about what he's done here. We're going to talk about the reasons why, the problematic reasons of what he did here, and why this encapsulates exactly what the state of Florida has attempted to do here in their strategy to railroad an innocent man into prison. So let's run the tape here, and then we'll talk about it.
I remember seeing her, and I was just like, all of a sudden, I felt like, well, I'm trying not to curse, but I felt really bad. Here I am feeling sorry for myself, and then I see her. That was his testimony. Next one, please. Paula's deposition back in May of 2019. This would be, what, about 2 years, almost 2 years after the event. Actually, he himself, Tucker, told me that when we were at McDonald's, he himself told me, oh, the police found a knife with blood on it, because I said, oh, good, it would be my blood. And he said, no, it's Matt's. That confirmatory test didn't come from FDLE until months, years later. So how did he know that was going to be Matt's blood on the knife? He told Paula 4 days after the event. He told me they found a knife, and I said, oh, good, that'll have my blood on it. And he said, no, not going to be your blood, it's going to be Matt's blood. If he was passed out from his red balls or atom bombs or fireballs back at the warehouse, how does he know about that? How does he know Matt's blood's going to be on that knife? Because he was there. He knows where that knife went. It went into Matt's back. That's how he knows. He knows that knife is not the one that was used on Paula. He knows that knife is the one that was used on Matthew Bonnet. Remember, he brought the knife to that event. Travis saw the knife in his possession. So he confirms to Paula, no, that's going to be Matt's blood. And then she said, whether that was true or not, I don't know. He himself told me that while we were sitting at McDonald's, that the knife that the police found had Matt's blood. That's a quote from her answer. She said it at least twice. She was not mistaken about what she remembered him saying. And that's very telling. That's huge. Because nobody would have known. Even the detectives didn't know it was Matt Bonnett's blood on that knife at that point in time.
I'll sustain the objection to the extent, remember folks, this is closing argument. Your decision and verdict is based upon the evidence in the law. And the counsel's giving a closing, which is not evidence. So with that, you can proceed.
Folks, you heard the testimony from Angela, our DNA expert. That's when we got the confirmatory results of the blood on the knife. That was long after, 4 days after this was a year, at least several months after the event. Tucker's telling Paula 4 days after the event whose blood is on the knife. Nobody knows that, sir, except the people that were there. Next one. Okay. Nobody would know that except the people that were there, and that's huge. Now, The defendant took the stand and he's been wrongly charged with this. That was his story. If you boil down his whole testimony, he started partying during Fantasy Fest and the party never ended. He said this is usually what he does this time of year, and on the day of this, he remembers drinking these fireballs and got so hammered he fell asleep. Woke.
All right, so let's talk about this for a minute. What did we hear there? We heard Prosecutor Mansfield essentially suggest that this information he shared with Paula, Mr. Tucker shared with Paula at McDonald's, was information. The inference here is that this is information only the murderer would know. Well, here's the problem, and this is the problem. Mr. Tucker's statement wasn't allowed to be brought into evidence, right? As a result, Mr. Mansfield was allowed to do this. Now, Mr. Mansfield, of course, waits until closing argument to make this argument. He doesn't really do that, and I guess you could say that's fair game, whatever. But they box him out. They keep this evidence out, right? The wrongness of this is Mr. Mansfield knows, and they're not allowed to bring this up, or Mr. Tucker's not allowed to bring this up or present this, but he knows how Mr. Tucker came about that information. Because what does Mr. Tucker tell him? Mr. Tucker tells him, or told Paula, that the police told him that Matt Bonnetts' blood was on that knife. Now, the insinuation here is that the police didn't do that. How did he do that? He skips over the fact that clearly she states that the police told him that Matt Bonnetts' blood was on that knife. Now, here's the situation, right? And this is what Mansfield's done here with this. And again, this is the problem. If you have a case, these type of tricks and tactics should not be being used in a criminal trial, because it's not about trying to trick a jury into believing someone's guilty. It's about saying, I've got the evidence, proof beyond a reasonable doubt, and here it is. A prosecutor doesn't need to engage in what he's done here. And we're going to get into, I'm going to show you, or once we get done with this discussion, I'm going to show you what actually happened here in this case and how he took that, twisted it, and turned it and tried to make this into a situation where a juror is going to go back into that room and say, holy cow, only Tucker would have known this information, because they have that. They do not have a moment like that anywhere in the case. Nowhere in the case is it like that. Nowhere in the case has Tucker done anything like that. In fact, what really happened here is nothing at all. This is a tremendous nothing burger, if in the end. But the problem is the jury doesn't have that information in front of them. In fact, all the jury ends up getting here is Mr. Tucker's response in his closing. Now, of course, the judge reminds them that, hey, closing arguments are not evidence. Closing arguments is just them arguing what the evidence means and arguing certain things and arguing what they should conclude from the evidence. So there's a lot of leeway in closing arguments. In fact, you can almost misstate things in closing arguments to a degree, because the assumption is that the prosecutor is just simply saying, this is what this means, and this is what you can infer from the evidence. And again, obviously you can't out and out simply lie about something, but there's a great deal of leeway given when they say X. If you take X and Y and Z, it means this. And it may not mean that at all, but they can tell you that that's what it means, because they're simply saying, this is what we think it means. The jury is the ultimate decider of fact in a trial, so they get to decide what it means. They get to decide whether it's, something that is proving guilt, something that's not proving guilt, somewhere in the middle. They get to decide the impact and the veracity of this stuff. But this, again, is just a demonstration of why of how weak this case is and the things these people are willing to do to try to go after an innocent man and put him in prison. And anybody who would be okay with putting a person at this point, they have to know. They know all the problems of the evidence. So Mr. Mansfield knows that he's got a problematic case here. Yet he's standing there comfortably making this argument in front of the jury to know that tomorrow, if this jury falls for what he's purporting to them, Mr. Tucker could go away for the rest of his life. Apparently, Mr. Mansfield doesn't care about that. And that's a shame. But anyways, let's jump to the next video here that we're going to show, and then we're going to talk about what this video means. All right, so let's run this video. This is, just to give you a background on this, this is from the interrogation that Ty Tucker had at the hands of Matthew Pitcher and Penny Phelps. And this is actually exactly what is being referred to by Mr. Mansfield and what Ty Tucker was told by Penny Phelps, and this is what he ends up communicating to Paula the next day. Take a listen.
That's on our side of the story.
Okay.
In the walk from Laurel Avenue on 2nd Street to where you live, we found in lot 72 a knife.
Okay.
Okay, on that knife is blood, and on the handle of that blood, latent DNA. That's going to the lab.
Well, it ain't gonna be me.
Okay, and a little further up the road, in the back of a boat parked alongside 2nd Street, is a mask.
Not gonna be me.
And the mask has a very weird, freaky, scary face on it, but it's also made out of foam, and on the front of the mask are 3 blood smears.
Okay. Not gonna be me.
Okay, and the mask has a really nice elastic band that goes around the back of the head, and a nice foam pad.
All right, so you heard it. Okay, this is the moment, the big moment here that Mr. Mansfield's talking about here, or at least referencing here. This is what Ty Tucker was communicating to Paul Belmonte. Here's what you need to understand about this moment. At this particular moment right here, Ty Tucker, okay, did not know what exactly happened at the treehouse. To his knowledge, his understanding, until he saw Paula Belmonte at McDonald's, to his knowledge, he'd heard there was a man stabbed at CVS. That man, he understood, or I believe it had come to be understood by conversations with other people, that it was Matt. So when he's told there's blood on the knife, in his mind, when he's getting told this, the conversation he's having with the detectives is about the man who got stabbed. He's not believing he's talking about. So from his recollection, when he's going to be retelling this story, the way this is being received by him. Now, I understand they're not saying it's Matt's blood, but at this point they haven't gotten into who was stabbed or what happened, or Paula got stabbed there, somebody got their neck cut, remember, all Ty Tucker knows is there's a knife, there's blood on it, and he believes this is in regards to the man that got stabbed. So when he's going to McDonald's the next day, and again, at the same point, Paul is not the most reliable witness. So we don't know what exactly was said. But the next day at McDonald's, when he's talking to her, he's communicating this conversation right here. Okay? He's not communicating something that he learned because he was there at the treehouse. He's communicating to her what he believes this lead detective has told him, which is there's a knife with blood and there's DNA on the handle. And if you notice here, he shakes his head and says, not going to be me. And you notice when he says it, one of the things you want to look at when somebody says an answer, if they're lying, their head may shake up and down when they're saying no. Okay? Because subconsciously, they're going to go into subconscious. When you see him answering these questions, it's no. The whole body almost shakes no. It's that he's very firm in his answers. He's very firm in what he knows he did and didn't do that night. And he's saying, I'm not a part of this. He says, I'm not a part of this. I might be, I might have been over at the warehouse. I might have been sleeping. I may have partied with these people, but man, this wasn't my stuff. And he says it in there. Listen, this ain't me. I got nothing to do with whatever the hell happened up at CVS. He's still believing it's at CVS, not at the treehouse. He doesn't even know what happened. Okay. He's not even aware of what happened. And that's, something that is carrying on. Again, we're not watching the entire interview here in this entire interaction. But the point is, what Mansfeld did here is he knew this video could never get in front of the jury. He knew Ty Tucker wasn't going to be able to go into his statement, right? What he told the police. Even if he wanted to testify to this, he couldn't have testified to it. In other words, he couldn't have referenced his statement because any statement made outside of court is considered hearsay, even if it's your own words. You can't bring in your own statement to bolster what you're saying. It's considered hearsay. So Mansfeld used that against him for the fact that the only way his statement could be brought into court would be to if there was something inconsistent with what he said. So he knew, Mansfeld knows he's protected by, and again, the judge giving him this leeway to do this, and the ethics of this is borderline here, but he knows Ty Tucker can't get this statement in order to demonstrate exactly what was said to him by the police. Penny Phelps isn't available to bring this in. The state doesn't have any intention of bringing in this statement. They were not bringing it in for impeachment, and it opened up the door for Mansfeld. Again, this is why Mansfeld wanted to bring that deposition in, because he wanted to get that deposition in to be able to make the argument he's making right now. Now, one would say Ty Tucker would have considered and said, was it worth it for him to have brought the deposition in? And that was why the judge was saying, well, Mr. Tucker, it opens up doors. And Mr. Mansfeld allowed that or offered that deposition in. And of course, Mr. Tucker, not seeing what he was going to try to do with that, said, yeah, just as he's kind of done as trying to be an honest guy and somebody who clearly he just wants it all in, because to him, he knows he has the facts and the truth on his side. So he's thinking to himself, I mean, what could hurt me in there? And then, of course, what he's not seeing, though, is how somebody like Mr. Mansfeld, a skilled, experienced attorney, can say, well, we can introduce that deposition. We can take that piece, since you're blocked from bringing in your statement to contradict us. We can bring that in, put that in front of the jury, read that to the jury, and in a closing argument, I'm going to take that piece and I'm going to argue it as if it is some sort of smoking gun that says, how would Ty Tucker have ever known this? How would you have known about it? I mean, he didn't even ask him about it in cross. He didn't go after him and say, Mr. Tucker, let me ask you, how did you know about this? He didn't even give him a chance. He didn't even let on to it. And that's kind of what the judge was inferring when he said, well, Mr. Tucker, closing arguments are coming tomorrow. There's going to be some arguments he can be made. This judge understood what was happening because he saw the picture here of what was developing around him. Mr. Tucker didn't, because he was inexperienced. He's not a lawyer. He's not someone who's familiar with how these things are going to go. And for him, he's an innocent guy trying to fight this system, thinking to himself, let it all come in. How could it be used against me? Unfortunately, when you have a skilled trial attorney, he can figure out how to take something honest and turn it into something nefarious. Take something honest and try to turn it into evidence of your guilt. And this is a scary thing, because this is not how it's supposed to work. In fact, our criminal justice system is supposed to be built to protect against individuals trying things like what Mr. Mansfeld did in this closing argument. And of course, it got Mr. Tucker's ire up and kind of flustered him a little bit when he got into his closing. He didn't start out probably from the position that he wanted to start out on, because he was so incensed by what Mr. Mansfeld had done, realizing this guy really pulled some nasty stuff. Not to mention that he attempted to insinuate that Mr. Tucker's wife bribed Paula without any evidence at all. Okay, no evidence at all of that. I mean, think about this. Mr. Mansfeld literally, I mean, this all began on Facebook, right? This all began because Detective Malone went to Facebook, looked at a picture, and said he must be guilty. It's kind of rich that Mr. Mansfield is going to try to end the case on that. He's going to try to finish the railroad job to send Ty Tucker to prison by going back to Facebook, taking pictures of Paula on vacation without any evidence whatsoever of how she got on vacation or where she went. He makes an absolutely disgustingly biased insinuation to say that because Paula's history of being a crack addict, because of her history of being homeless, because of her history of living in what he called a flop house, that as a result of that, it must mean that she couldn't have found a way to go on a vacation to Florida. And he insinuates, or Florida, or to California, and he insinuates that she posts these pictures of her trips to California, comes back, and somehow this makes her extra sure of Mr. Tucker, that Mr. Tucker wasn't the guy. And that suddenly now she's naming Travis Jones. That didn't have anything to do with her having being able to see Travis Tucker, hear Travis Tucker. That it didn't have anything to do with her. Again, remember, there was another event that occurs during that fateful time that unfortunately Mr. Tucker couldn't argue to the jury. And you know what it was? It was the outing. It was the figuring out. It was the IA investigation. It was the sudden realization that there were major problems with this investigation and that Phelps, Malone, Pitcher were all corrupt. See, Paula didn't come to the realization. It didn't strengthen her resolve that Mr. Tucker couldn't be involved because of Mr. Tucker's wife. It was because this investigation happens and she finds out that Pitcher, the detective, had mishandled 178 pieces of evidence. She finds out that Penny Phelps mishandled 208 pieces of evidence, and that Danielle Malone mishandled 40 pieces of evidence. And what you have to understand is Mr. Pitcher, Detective Pitcher, okay, was somebody who was meeting with Paula daily. In his testimony, in his deposition, he said they were meeting almost weekly, but up until he was kicked off the investigation. And as she said, she continued to tell him, I don't believe it was Tyrone. It just didn't feel like it was Tyrone. It didn't sound like Tyrone. This wasn't Tyrone. This is before any trip she took to California. This is between 2017 and 2019. She never wavered off of that, regardless of what Mr. Mansfield wants to allege in court or how he wants to twist it in court, how he wants to twist the surviving victim who had her neck cut in court, how he wants to use the judicial knife to cut her neck again by making her endure the fact that they're going to lock up an innocent man on her name, invoking her name in her words, and ignoring the words that they don't like. And that's an injustice. Because the real reason why Paula began to strengthen her resolve and the fact that Ty Tucker was innocent was because she realized the investigators that she was relying upon, that she was giving deference to, that she was putting credibility in, who were assuring her there were things that they didn't know, that she didn't know, that were pointing to Ty. She found out that all of them couldn't be trusted, and that in fact, they were lying to her, they were lying to others, they mishandled evidence, and suddenly she said, you know what? What I thought was correct. What I felt was correct. And I should have never listened to those people to make me have any doubts. Because for whatever reason, those people wanted to go after Ty Tucker and wanted her to believe Ty Tucker was guilty of something that they had no evidence that he was guilty of. So I will leave you with that. But I hope that clears up the issue about this knife. This knife is nothing. This knife is a nothing burger. It's absolutely nothing. It's nothing more than Ty Tucker being told at the time that he's being told. He has a very limited information as to what is occurring, and he believes at the moment that he's being told this by Detective Malone, that, or not detective, by Captain Phelps, that what he's being told is about the guy who got stabbed at CVS parking lot. And in his mind, that computes to the fact that to him, that computes that blood on the knife that they're talking about would be Matt Bonnetts' blood. End of story. That's how it computes. And again, we don't even really know what was actually said or how it was communicated, but the way Paula takes it is that he's saying, oh no, it's Matt Bonnetts' blood, and that's how she remembers it. It's not mine. And he says, no, because at that point he's like, no, they were talking to me about the knife that they think was used in the killing. And that's what they were inferring. That's how it was coming across. So to him, that's Matt's blood. And it ain't coming because he's at Matt's doing the stabbing. That's ridiculous. That's stupid. And I hope this jury is smart enough to see through that. So with that said, guys, hopefully this clears that up for everyone. If you've watched this, hopefully you take a look. You let me know in the comments as you do. I appreciate it when you guys comment and let me know. But this is a whole lot of nothing. And hopefully tomorrow morning, the jury is going to get charged. And my hope is that tomorrow evening we will be hopefully, I won't say celebrating, although celebration is at hand, but at the same point, it's never great to celebrate a verdict because, at the end of the day, someone still lost their life here. People got injured. It was a horrible event. Man lost six years of his life, but in a certain sense, when justice is served, when the right outcome happens, when somebody who's innocent, who's being attacked by the entire state apparatus, and all the money and all the resources the state of Florida are coming at him, and he is able to beat that alone, and he's able to go into a courtroom and win. There's a bit of celebration, I think, that allows for. But hopefully we will be reflecting on the fact that this case was decided correctly. Maybe we're still being in deliberations. Who knows? But we'll have some sort of an answer or movement forward. We'll either be talking about that the jury's put in a full day of deliberations, and we know that they're having trouble with the case, or have a quick verdict that I hope is not guilty, that will resoundingly send a message back to these prosecutors and police officers that the antics and the behavior and this type of a case is not ever going to be allowed to take someone's freedom, liberty, and happiness in the United States of America in 2024. With that said, until we talk again, let justice prevail. I'll see you in the morning for court while we listen to the jury be charged and deliberations begin. Talk to you soon, and let justice prevail.